I cannot wait to jam with Udi Ledergor. He is the Chief Evangelist at Gong. He went from marketer number 1 to Gong's Chief Marketing Officer. So it's been over 6 years that you've been there. So welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Anna. Excited to be here.
Yeah. I mean, I was bugging you for a while and I'm like, Udi, please come join me. Udi, please come join me. And you're like, I'm busy. But then finally you said yes. So I appreciate you taking the time. So at Gong, you led the creation of the revenue intelligence category. I definitely want to talk about that. You really took Gong from zero to hundreds of millions in revenue. You helped take that company in that positive direction. So just awesome to have you here. 5-time marketing leader at B2B startups. And might I add that you're also really good at playing the piano, because I've seen you on LinkedIn when you post those videos. So I wanted to ask you, where did you learn?
Where did I learn piano or marketing?
Yeah. Where did you learn piano?
So I've been playing piano from a relatively older age. I started as a teenager because I was living in Israel and I had a neighbor. We were living in an apartment building. My neighbor was playing the electric organ and I used to hear it through the walls and I got really excited about it. And I walked over and wanted to see what he's doing. And just that instrument seemed magical with all the keyboards. There's a keyboard you play with your feet and there's 2 keyboards you play with your hands. And I think I was like in the 8th grade and I came to my parents and said, I want to go learn how to play that. And so they sent me to organ school for a couple of years and I really enjoyed it. And then I auditioned for the music department at the high school that I wanted to get into. And somehow miraculously they accepted me. But they did say that I'm going to have to switch from organ to piano because organ tends to play solo. And at the music school, they want to encourage ensembles. So playing with other musicians. So I switched to piano and the rest, as they say, is history. So I've only had honestly, probably 2.5 formal years of classical education during high school. And then I took the show on the road. I played the wedding and hotel circuits for a few years just as a second job / hobby after my day job. And in the last couple of years, I've gotten back to, I've been playing at the Berkeley Jazz School up until COVID when they shut down for a couple of years and just really enjoying it and sharing it on social media with my friends. Apparently a few more people enjoy listening to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've got talent because my mom's a piano teacher. I've been playing piano for my whole life. Now my kids are playing piano, but 2.5 years and you've got some talent and clearly you enjoy doing it. I probably enjoy it less because I had to do it and I had to do the competitions and so there's something about the had to part versus you seem to really enjoy it. And
the same dilemma with my children at the moment. One of them started and retired after 1 term of piano lessons and my older daughter, she's been taking piano for about a year, but she's already indicated that this might be her last. So I don't know how far to push because I do want them to enjoy it, but they need to actually get beyond a certain level to start enjoying it when they're hearing their own music. I don't know that I'm very successful at that.
Yeah, I had no choice, so I couldn't stop. My kids also have no choice because it's grandma now. So anyways, let's talk about Gong. Founded in based out of San Francisco. Plus people now. On the funding side, $5 million total funding raised. I believe they hit unicorn status August 2020. So
that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just been one of those companies that everybody wants to talk about. If you're a marketer, you want to talk about Gong because there's something creative or something really cool or something like that they did, right? And you just want to bring it up with your other marketing friends. So the description, if you guys haven't heard about Gong, it's the revenue intelligence platform. Gong unlocks reality to help people and companies reach their full potential. So that's about Gong. Let's go back to creativity because we were talking about piano. When I say the word creative, what do you think about, Udi? What does that mean to you?
So I think I'll answer your question in a little bit different way, maybe. I think to me, marketing is using creativity to solve business problems. And so I've always been a huge fan of doing creative things. To be completely honest, for most of my years, I didn't think I was a very creative person. Contrary to everything people were telling me, I'm like, no, I set my bar very high, looking at creative geniuses in many fields, from television to performing arts to plastic arts and others. And I always wanted to be involved in what they're doing, whether it's just as a listener at a concert or helping out my high high school had a theater department and a cinema department, just helping them out with their productions. I felt I was part of creating the magic. And then when I had, and as a child, we already talked about me doing music. I also did magic for many years and just played around with a bunch of performing arts. And when it was time to look for a grown-up job, I found a few years into my career that marketing really allowed me to play around with all these creative tools and toys and use them in a way that I actually got paid for to solve business problems. So how awesome is that? Like, if you think about putting on a conference or a trade show, it doesn't have to be drearily boring. It can be super exciting. And that's like putting on a magic show or a theater show. And so it's really the business version of stage creativity, if you like, and getting on stage, speaking to a crowd full of people and trying to transform the way they think about something. That's kind of like what an actor does when she gets on stage every evening. So that's kind of what drew me to the profession and how I think about it. I think creativity to me is taking an non-obvious approach to solving something. If it's been done a million times before, you probably wouldn't call it creative, but taking a less common, less obvious, less trivial approach to solving a problem, I think that's what people tend to refer to as creative. And when you talk about Gong's marketing, that's kind of been the approach that we've been taking for many, many years. Like, what has not been done in this space before? How can we approach this in a completely fresh, new way that will get people to pay attention? So that's kind of been the way I've incorporated creativity at Gong's marketing.
Yeah. Well, we talked about you a little bit with the piano. I just want to talk a little bit more about you. Like, when do you think you personally, because creativity, you draw it from, you've been creative, although you didn't think that you were, but the magic, the getting on stage, the storytelling, high school cinema department, that sounds pretty creative. So when do you think you were personally the most creative, if you can think about in your past?
Ooh. That's an interesting one. I don't know that there's a moment or a specific period that I would point to. I think life has thrown many challenges my way. To be clear, I've had a very good and privileged life so far, but it has thrown many challenges my way. And I've found myself in a position where I could either sort of give up and say, okay, I can't solve, these problems, or find a creative solution to get what I wanted to get done. I'll give you a few examples from very different areas of life to paint some color on what I'm talking about. So as a gay man growing up in Israel, we could not get married in our country. We could not have children with the help of a surrogate in our country. We could not do many things that the law prohibits in Israel. And I and my husband found very creative solutions, from going to get married in Canada because we discovered that would be recognized as legal marriage in Israel, having our children in the US with the help of two wonderful surrogates, because then we could register them in Israel as our children. And when I found out that the laws in Israel were very discriminating against gay men, I co-founded a nonprofit with a few other gay fathers, and I had the privilege of chairing that nonprofit for 5 years before moving to the Bay Area. And we filed several petitions with the Supreme Court in Israel, and we won. And now it's legal for gay men to have babies using surrogates in Israel. And so
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't say that to sort of get the kudos, although I do appreciate them, but just to give an example of sort of where I think a creative approach allows you to solve many problems that to others might seem insurmountable. Like, oh, that's the law. I mean, what can you do? Well, go change the law. And I'm having these conversations with my young children. My 10-year-old daughter wrote a letter to the San Francisco mayor last year telling her, Mayor London Breed, which we appreciate a lot. And she wrote her about our family and that she is thinking of becoming a mayor one day and asking for any tips. And a couple of weeks later, we got a response, a personal response from Mayor Breed, talking to my daughter and encouraging her on her journey. And I think just by opening these doors and these horizons to children and later on in life, that you can do a lot more than you probably think you can, or that most people think they can, by just questioning everything and second guessing everything. So what if it's the law? I'm not suggesting you break the law, but let's go change the law if you don't like it. Get into politics, get into a position of power, change the law. I fully recognize my position of power, the fact that I'm an executive at a company, and the social following that I enjoy. There's tens of thousands of people who follow me on LinkedIn. I use that position of power to advocate for things like gay rights and women's rights. And I comment on what's happening in the political world and the social world, because I realize many other people who are oppressed by what's happening today in the world don't feel that they have the liberties that I have to get out there and share controversial opinions. Not that I think they should be controversial, but apparently they are. And I get a lot of support messages from people who really appreciate the way I'm using my position of power to share opinions that they would love to see more of, but they don't feel they're in a position yet of being able to speak so freely. So those are just some ways, I think, creativity. I know we started in a very different place, this discussion, but we can use creativity and creative approaches to solve otherwise insurmountable problems in many, many areas of life.
Yeah, I didn't think about creativity in terms of solving problems, but now that you talk about it in that way, I think that's really what gets people jazzed about marketing is like you have a business, there are challenges, but you have an excuse to be creative in how you solve them. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I see it as essentially a very similar problem to having to fill 4 bars with a piano solo. That's to me still a harder problem than doing a Super Bowl commercial to solve a pipeline problem. So they're all just creative problems, and you need to find an interesting approach to solve it. And if it hasn't been done before and it solves the business problem, then in the case of business, the marketers will love what we're doing because every marketer loves getting creative and doing things that are not same old, same old. And if it also solves the business problem that we're here to solve, then everybody wins.
That's right. So let's talk about Gong now, coming back, because creativity, that's exactly what I've been focused on for the season 3 of the show. And I love your insights and your thoughts just based on your experience. From your experience at Gong, what would you say are some of the top creative, innovative marketing ideas from your perspective? And again, people talk about Gong all the time when it's like, what's a creative, innovative company? Of course, Gong comes up, the Super Bowl ad, all the different social plays you guys were running. You kind of started this whole influencer marketing, getting ambassadors from the company to, talk about, educate the market on certain things and get people to follow a lot of folks from the inside out, right? And rave about Gong and learn about Gong through that way. So from your perspective, what are some of the top creative marketing ideas?
It's tempting to talk about the glitzy, glamorous stuff like the Super Bowl commercial, but I'm going to resist temptation with your permission and talk about 2 motions that I think are more foundational and in the long term had a bigger impact than even a successful Super Bowl commercial. One of them was in the very, very early days of Gong. Again, I was the only marketer. I'd been on the job for a couple of days. Amit, our CEO and co-founder, and I had to quickly figure out an initial direction that we wanted to take our content marketing, because both of us sort of grew up as content marketers in the marketing field, and we knew that that's one of the best ways, working on a shoestring budget, which is what I had in the early days, to build a following and an inbound motion and create engagement and meaningful marketing connections with prospects so that the SDR and the salespeople would have a much easier time speaking with them. And so I remember asking Amit on my first day on the job, what kind of content do you already have that I can start using? Because he'd been at the company for a few months now. And he said, I've got nothing. I said, come on, Amit, you've got to have something. So he looked through his computer, he found this 5-slide presentation that he showed at some conference a few weeks earlier. And I said, this is a great start on me. Let me have that. It had 5 slides on it showing, after analyzing the few first 1,000 Gong calls in the system, what was the optimal talk time that salespeople had to increase the chances of getting another call with the prospect, and how many questions they were asking C-level prospects, and a few things like that. And I said, this is a great start. I took that PowerPoint presentation, I saved it as a PDF file, added a cover slide that I think I called the 5 secrets of the perfect pitch or something like that. And I said, I've got my first ebook, and I think people are going to like it, because if you go to Amazon and you search for books on sales, there are over books on sales. It's probably in the millions, but Amazon search is capped at 100. It can't show more results. And so we thought, well, the world doesn't need another book on sales, or does it? Because turns out that the vast majority of those books are a sort of walk down memory lane of 1 or 2 people's experience. Aaron built a wonderful SDR team at Salesforce. He wrote a book about it. Someone else had a good experience at Xerox. They wrote a book about it. But how broadly applicable are those lessons to other businesses? What is kind of an undisputed fact or truth about sales? There weren't many books about that. So we thought, if we pulled out data-backed insights that tell people once and for all, this works, this doesn't work, do this, don't do that, that might work. And turns out we were right. And people really ate up those insights, showing based on 20,000 calls, if you open a call saying, how have you been, rather than how are you, you're going to get a lot more call time with this person. And turns out that if you curse on your sales calls or swear, especially if your prospect started doing it first, you're going to increase your win rates by 8%. And a lot of this was counterintuitive intuitive to people. A lot of it supported things that people already felt intuitively, but never had the data to show for it. And so the argument could go on forever. And so we put an end to a lot of these arguments and started a few new ones ourselves. But we did this based on data, and people absolutely loved it. And I think that strategy of data-backed sales tips has really elevated Gong's brand, and a lot of the love and support that we see from companies and people that aren't even using Gong yet. They just say, I've been reading your content for years. I share it with my team every week. I can't wait for the next Gong Labs post. We call this content series Gong Labs to indicate that it's based on something more scientific than just the muses of a content marketer. And so we created this great brand of Gong Labs. And I think that was a big part of elevating our brand when we were very young and had hardly any customers. We had already a large following of people that were in it for the content. And so I think that was a creative solution that now more and more companies are trying to follow and replicate, which I'm very, very excited about. But I think Gong was one of the first in the space that really built a brand on data-backed, high-quality content that was not fluff, that people were really looking forward to receiving. And I'll just add one final point on that story. One of the ways that we measure the standard of the content at Gong, which I encourage every company to do, is your content so good that people are willing to pay for it? And there were several instances when people who read our content wrote back asking how much we would charge them for licenses to use this content, either in university courses on sales. So several assistant professors and professors wrote me asking to license our material for their courses, and many enablement teams and sales training teams called or wrote in asking to license our materials for their internal team trainings. And every year during sales kickoff season, we get dozens of requests for speakers from Gong to go speak at other companies' kickoffs, which is very rare to invite a vendor to speak about something at a sales kickoff, but we get those invites every year because people know that we come with meaningful insights that are going to inspire their teams. So we really met that standard of content so good that people are willing to pay for, and I think that's something every content and marketing team should probably strive for.
Are you guys ever talking about, or have you talked about doing something like a subscription if you want to get to the real meaty insights on a regular basis? Because people are doing that now, and that's kind of a way to monetize on the content. You can create some that's for free. You can create some that's a little bit more the meatier stuff, right? More significant. You spend more time on it, then you can charge for that. Are you thinking about that?
No, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
I've talked to other leading companies in their fields that have tried a content monetization strategy. Not one of them has succeeded in creating a meaningful revenue stream. And I think we need to keep the eye on the ball. Gong is a software company. We're in the business of selling software licenses. Creating wonderful content that people are willing to pay for is a marketing investment that we're making in the business. We want to hook them on the content and then sell them on the product. That is the business that we're building. I don't want to put up any walls of friction between my audience and the end goal of getting them to buy Gong. So if there are millions of people who are reading the Gong content, that's fantastic. I don't want to decrease that number by even one reader by making them think twice whether they want to pay for the content or not. My goal is to sell software licenses. So that's how I'm keeping the eye on the ball.
Pay attention to your end goal. Yep.
I will say though, not dissimilar to your idea. In our product releases, we are increasingly adding exclusive content for Gong users. So being part of that community of Gong users will give you access to more and more of this content, especially in an upcoming release in a couple of months, which I can't share all the details about yet. But there is going to be exclusive content there that you can only access as a Gong customer. But I don't want to charge you directly for the content. I want you to be a Gong customer, and then as an added bonus, you get some of this exclusive content.
Okay, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I would have not known your stance on this because as a content creator, I've got this podcast and I'm constantly hearing people say like you should really start charging for your listeners, right? If they are subscribing, they get access to content. You have great speakers on here, great. But that's not my product, right? And I actually would not want to turn people away. I want this to be readily available. And the same thing for my newsletter. That's not my product. I know some people monetize off of that. I want people to freely...
if you're the New York Times, advertising alone is probably not enough. So you have to sell licenses, subscriptions. I pay for the New York Times. I enjoy reading the content. We all pay for content, right? If you have a Netflix or a Disney Plus or a HBO subscription, you're paying for content. If you're on Masterclass or on Coursera or or on Udemy, you're paying for content. There's nothing wrong with charging or paying for content. It's just knowing what your main business is and what the goal of that media business is. Is it a means to an end, like in Gong's case, or is that your business? And in that case, you absolutely should monetize it.
Absolutely. Okay. So when you're creating this, I love the description of when you just started out in the early days and you guys were thinking about like, what's our content marketing going to be? And you focused on, this data-backed insights, data-backed sales tips, and really use data, but in a creative way, right? So you kind of balance the creativity with the data. How do you think about, sometimes companies really go hard into like, we need data, we need to show data. Like there's other parts of Gong though that comes out with your personality and like your flair. And so how do you think about that when you want people to see you as very serious, you know what you're doing, you have a lot of data, your product works, and as part of that, you share the data to show how much right? So people start to trust you. But how do you balance that with then this fun personality?
I love that question, Anna, because I think what a lot of companies get wrong is that they confuse being serious and being an authority in their field, which every company wants to, but they confuse that with being boring. And that's where Gong also took a different approach, call it creativity if you like, but we did early on a brand personality analysis. We would have Gong's personality as if it were a person. Would it be young or old? Would it be casual or would it be formal? Is it going to be quirky or is it going to be very official? And we looked across, I think, 8 or more different personality traits, and we picked a spot on the range between the two extremes. And we decided to combine a few traits in a way that we hadn't really seen that was done before. I think that the two maybe most obvious opposites that you can think about is kind of similar to what you just explained, which is we want to be an authority in our field. We want people to trust Gong on our data and go to Gong as the source of truth for what works and doesn't work in sales. But we wanted to do that in a way that we're not this stuffy salesperson in a suit, but rather we're this friendly friend that you come to when you have a question, when you want help. He or she are going to be interesting and fun, and you just want to hang out with them. So combining those two qualities together of authority and very unbuttoned, informal friendliness, that's what I think created this unique brand personality. We have buttoned it up a little bit in the last few years because as we moved from being a startup vying for attention to much larger enterprise selling to some of the biggest companies in the world, they want to feel that we cater to enterprise companies and we're not a startup selling to startups. So we've had to adjust some of the personality trait. I mean, if you go to our website, you still see Bruno the bulldog, that crazy mascot at the bottom right, chatting with you and barking at you. And you still see in our marketing that we try to keep it fun and informal, but we've definitely evolved the visual brand, the tone of voice to stay human and friendly and conversational, but also leave you with no doubt that this is an enterprise brand that can answer all your security and privacy concerns and all that quote unquote boring stuff, but you have to do when you're selling to large enterprises. That's kind of the genesis of that combination of seemingly opposite character traits, but they don't have to be opposite. You can be an authority and interesting and fun at the same time.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that even startups that sell into enterprise, because I work with some of them and I've talked to some of them, they come from a place where nobody trusts them yet. So they want the trust. And I end up telling them, like, you still need to show something. Like, a company is filled with people. Who are you guys? What do you sound like? What do you feel like? What do you want to feel like? What do you want to look like? It's got to be something, even if you do want to build that trust early on with enterprise.
Absolutely. I mean, we've tested this. So here, I'll share another data nugget, but if it isn't obvious yet, on social media, you're far more likely to comment or like on a post that comes from a human being, that you can see their face and you can hear their tone, than you are to comment on a corporate page's profile where you see a logo and there's no spirit behind it. There's no personality behind it. So why would you only post from your corporate profile and keep it all sort of anonymous behind this corporate name rather than can empower your employees, empower your executives, your marketers, your practitioners to post in their own words with their face right up next to it in their tone of voice using the first person so people can have a conversation with them. If someone disagrees with a person, they're likely to write something about it and engage in a discussion. If you disagree with some cold, heartless post from a corporate, why would you waste your time responding to it not knowing if anyone's behind there even going to answer you? So that goes for social media, it goes for email communications. Like, it's mind-boggling that people are still sending out emails where the sender address is, I don't know, team at or info at or don't reply at. Like, that sounds like my phone bill. It doesn't sound like anyone I'd want to have a conversation with.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, we haven't even talked about category design yet, so I want to make sure that we get there, but there's just so much to talk to you about, Udi. Okay, so from being marketer number 1 to then moving up to CMO at Gong, I want to, because a lot of the listeners are early stage startups. They're looking to grow, right? Some of them are kind of all over the board, right? But when you joined as marketer number 1, we talked about kind of how you were talking, the CEO around what's your content marketing strategy. What were those things that you focused on first? And how did you stack your skills or stack your priorities over time?
I think as a head of marketing, the two things that the CEO and the board care about from you are number 1, pipeline, and number 2, getting your story straight and promoting it so everyone knows what it is. Those are kind of the two main things. If you get those two things right, everything else will be forgiven. If you don't get those two things right, you're going to be in trouble. So pipeline and getting your story straight and getting it out there. Those are kind of the two things. And the way you do that and the nuances of those things, they change over time, right? So pipeline in the early days could be just get me a live body to speak to that's willing to talk to our salespeople, and they might buy. I don't care what country or industry or company size or title they have. And that becomes more and more nuanced, and you start figuring out qualification criteria, and then you do care about their industry and company size, buyer persona, and you do want to standardize on a product for a certain industry and a certain geo, and things get more nuanced. So you have to advance your skills and definitely use a lot of analytical acumen there to understand how to target a certain buyer's market. And then on the story side, that evolves a lot, especially in the early days, but even later on, as we'll probably discuss soon about the category creation stuff, like who are we selling to? How are we different than the alternatives or the state of the art or the incumbents out there? And what are we doing to get that story out there? And how well are we doing this as we can measure, which is tricky sometimes. Those are the two main things. And they've kind of been my focus, as I think they are or should be every head of marketing's focus. And then you hire great people to compensate for your weaknesses, and hire great people for all of those and many other areas, parts of those areas, to build the great machine that we build at Gong. So do you want to jump into the category creation stuff?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, who did you start hiring first? You were first marketer. Yeah. Who did you hire first?
My first hire in marketing was Chris Orlob, who was, despite a slightly different title that he held at the time, he was our content marketer from day one. And he created the Gong Labs content series with my guidance, but all the work and credit is his. And he did that for about 3 years on the team. And by the time he transitioned into another role in sales, we had already built quite an established brand called Gong Labs that continues to this day. So that was a very, very good investment that turned out to be very good for the business.
And then beyond that, so content marketer, Gong Labs, who else did you hire?
Was marketing automation. I hired a very smart lady named Noah, and she took off of my hands all the automation stuff that she was very excited and passionate about. I love playing around with that stuff, but it is so time consuming that I could not free myself to deal with strategy and other things that there was literally no one else on the team to do, because I was bogged down half a day building a campaign in HubSpot or testing a landing page on different mobile platforms. It just did not make sense for the head of marketing to continue doing that for long. So while Chris was working on the content, I brought in Noah, who took off my hands all this automation and integration work. She is an absolute wizard with tools, and she figured out how to connect everything and created some amazing workflows on our website and connected into other internal systems that 6 years later are still running untouched because they're just so effective. So kudos to Noah. That was my second hire, and that allowed me to really do a little bit of everything else. So we needed to create an event booth and a keynote. I went and did that. We needed some marketing collaterals. I worked on that with Chris. We needed to do some sales training. We needed to speak somewhere. I jumped up and did that. I ran our social media.
Wow.
Yeah. and then just hired more people to help with all that stuff. And it was an exciting time, those early days.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, yes, I do want to talk about revenue intelligence and the category that you came up with. How big, let's just kind of think back to how big was Gong when you first set out to create a category? What was your process? Why did you decide now is the time? What was your process to define the category? What tools did you use? What books did you read? What did you, who did you bring on to have those conversations? And then we can talk about how did you educate the market on that?
So the year was 20. So we had been in market for about 3 years, still a small company by any standard. And we had been operating within the existing conversation intelligence category at the time. And we felt that we had a couple of challenges that a new category could potentially solve for us. And the two challenges were, one, we felt that our long vision for what we want to do at Gong with our platform and how we can help sales people and sales teams was far reaching beyond what anyone in our space was talking about. And so we had outgrown the category of conversation intelligence. Everyone in conversation intelligence was talking about recording your calls, playing them back for coaching, and that was about it. And we were being pigeonholed in that category, kind of victims of our own success, if you like, because we were recognized as the category leader and not enough people were getting the long-term vision that we were sharing with them. So we thought, okay, maybe if we broke away from conversation intelligence, we could say, oh, that's a different category. Let me tell you about what we do and why it's different and better. The second problem that we wanted to solve is when trying to engage with senior sales leaders, we would meet with a CRO and tell her, hey, we want to talk to you about conversation intelligence. And she would say, well, that sounds like a tool that enablement does. So go talk to Michelle. She deals with those conversation tools. And we wanted to get and keep the attention of CRO or other heads of sales and senior executives. So we thought that using a different name for the category that sounds like something that they can't delegate as easily. Sorry about the fire truck going down the street.
Oh, that's okay.
Now you know this is a live recording.
Yes.
So we thought that by changing the name of the category to something that the revenue leader cares about even more, we could keep that attention. And so to solve those two problems, we started looking around and we got some inspiration from what Anthony Canada had done at Gainsight for many years, building the customer success software category. He wrote a great book about it. And then there's other folks who wrote the Think Big book, and they helped other companies build their categories. And then we realized we probably need someone smart and capable to lead this, because this is not a part-time gig. You have to herd all the cats, all the executive team, all the departments of the company if you're going to succeed in this, which is probably a mistake most companies make, where they think this is a cute little marketing campaign, let them go play with it and come back with a category. It doesn't work that way.
No.
It has to come back. It has to start at the top, backed by the CEO, ingrained and enforced and reinforced by every single executive in the company, all the way to the last employee. Otherwise, it's not going to be believable, because if the company doesn't believe in it, nobody else is going to believe it. So we came across a wonderful young lady named Sheena Badani, who was interviewing at Gong for another role. And we thought, we were all very, very impressed with her. And we didn't think she was a good fit for the other role that she originally came to interview for, but we came to her and said, Sheena, we love you. We want you to work for us, just not for the role you were interviewing for, but we want to create this new thing and let you lead our category creation. And she thought about it for a few days, and she came back. She said, challenge accepted. She's been with the company ever since, and she definitely gets all the credit for leading our category creation. She's done a fantastic job there. And by putting someone smart full-time on category creation, we were able to build and track a very comprehensive program. I didn't say the name of the category yet, so to give the end spoiler, she led us through a process of several months where we landed on the new category name, which was revenue intelligence. That did not exist until that point. And we thought that revenue intelligence would speak to the senior sales leader, because it's literally got the name revenue in it. So the revenue leader probably cares about it and won't as easily delegate this further. And it is different enough from conversation intelligence that allows us to differentiate ourselves more easily and say, conversation intelligence is just a small part of the technology that powers revenue intelligence. And now let me tell you about our vision, which is much farther looking than the ones of those in conversation intelligence are using. And so it did work. Sheena and the rest of the team put together a great plan. We launched the Revenue Intelligence podcast. We launched the Revenue Intelligence Summit. We started creating content and language in our website and collaterals and presentations and speaking opportunities about what is revenue intelligence, how the winning sales teams are using it, and it propelled. And we measured things like Google searches for revenue intelligence that started at 0 when we launched and are now well into the thousands of per month. We looked at social media mentions of revenue intelligence, about competitors and analysts changing their language to talk about revenue intelligence. So we had to do dozens of briefings for Gartner and Forrester and others until they started publishing reports about the revenue intelligence category, which did not exist 2 years before they wrote that first report. So those are some of the ways that we went about it and measured the true success and creation of the category.
What were some of the other terms that you guys were thinking about? Because to me, it's like, well, of course, if you want to get the attention of the CRO, you talk about revenue, and intelligence means that you're getting insights and you're getting smarter because of this new information. So can you remember, like, what were some of the other terms? And you're like, nah, that doesn't work.
I'm glad that you said that. Sort of, it rolls off the tongue and sounds so natural and obvious, but none of these options sounded natural and obvious when we were considering them. None of them did. Anyone who's been in category or product naming will tell you that it always feels very, very strange, and you just don't know how it's going to land. After you've established a category and everyone knows you, and whether it's a product name or a company name or a category name, it all sounds natural and as if it's always been there. It never ever sounds that name when you launch it. It's always like, oh, this is kind of quirky, and will people understand it? And does it mean anything, or does it sound, I don't know, fake or weird? So we never had that confidence when we launched it. We literally ranked, I don't know, 6 different options. I can't remember the exact number. And this one just came out the winner by a few points, not a knockout. And I'm glad that we did. By the way, today, I will say, looking at this 4 years later, we are taking a fresh look. And you might have noticed in the last year or so, we've been putting less emphasis on promoting the category of revenue intelligence and more about promoting our own platform, because now the space has become more competitive. Everyone's talking about revenue intelligence. So it's not as attributed to Gong as it was in the early days. And it's now a year where we're focusing more on our platform narrative and how we differentiate from the other platforms out there, and less on the category that we were focused on for the first 3 years after launch. Some of the other combinations didn't necessarily include the word intelligence. We loved revenue from almost the beginning, but we tried combining it with words like revenue management and revenue execution and revenue excellence and a bunch of things like that sound weird to you now. They didn't sound any weirder than revenue intelligence at the time. I can promise you that. And in hindsight, by the way, now that our platform is so much more action-oriented, we question internally whether intelligence is still the right word, because intelligence has a connotation to it that it's something passive that you get and then you need to decide on the action and do it manually. But today the platform is something very different, and it is very actionable in the insights that it presents. So it's far more advanced than just intelligence, and it even is stepping into a lot of automation, which is far beyond intelligence. So I wouldn't be surprised if that category changes again at some point.
Okay, wow. Well, you heard it here first, guys. The new category, who knows what that's going to be, but definitely more action-oriented. Got it. Okay, really cool. I just love asking this question for companies that design their own category. Like, how long did it take? How much effort goes into it? What you start off doing transforms later because you spend so much time educating people, and then everybody starts saying this term, and now you got to focus back on your actual platform. Make sure that you talk about that because, okay, everybody's accepting this revenue intelligence category now. So, so it's a lot of kind of like movement and figuring out where are we right now? Okay, the Google searches went up. People are talking about it. Social media mentions, Gartner published report. Great. Like it's working. It's working. So now let's turn it back onto our platform. Not that you stopped talking about your platform, right? You still did. You just had to balance both.
We did. But for the first 2 to 3 years, we really did put a concerted effort around promoting the category versus promoting the platform. And again, I think that's what propelled us so much faster, because people let their guards down when you talk about a common problem they can agree on and an approach to the solution of that problem. When you're clearly promoting your product by me, that puts people's guards up because I hate being sold to. But if you're educating me about a problem I truly have and I can nod in agreement, and then you propose an approach to a solution which makes a lot of sense, I can nod to that. Absolutely. After that convincing me that you have the best solution, that's a smaller, easier step to take than pushing a product in my face from the first moment. So there are many great examples of category creation that do that, where they focus on the category. And then I happen to have here in my car the best solution that you need for that problem. But let's agree on the problem and on the general approach to the solution before I start pitching my product. I will say though, before I answer your question, sort of advice for category creators, my first piece of advice for category creators is avoid it like the plague. If you don't have to create a category, and you probably don't. I saw a piece of research that I'm trying to track down for the source that analyzed the top publicly traded SaaS companies. Can you guess what percentage of them actually created a category to succeed?
1%?
You're close. It was 8%. You're not far.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a very small percentage of successful publicly traded SaaS companies actually created a category. And, there's great companies like HubSpot that created inbound marketing. There's Qualtrics, created customer experience. There's Gainsight, they're not public yet, but Gainsight created customer success. Very few companies actually did that. The vast majority, 92% of the other companies, they operate within an existing category. They're disrupting the category. They're better, or they're cheaper, or they're doing something different within an existing category. And that's probably what most companies should end up doing, because the undertaking of building a category is humongous in terms of time, effort, money, energy, attention. And so if you don't have to do that, and you probably don't, just don't. Avoid it. Now, if you are amongst the crazy 8%, there's a need and determination to create a category, then as I said before, you have to understand this is not going to be an overnight thing. You have to understand, when I say not overnight, it is very rare to see any sort of indication in less than 18 to 24 months that something that you're doing is coming out as results right now. If you're expecting results in a quarter or two, it's very unlikely you're going to see anything. So if you're not in it for the long game, and long game could be 2, 3, 5 years to create a category, just don't go into it. You have to have stamina.
That comes from a successful category design example. And, looking back, you're like, that was really hard. That was a lot of work. Don't do it.
Absolutely.
But you also created an amazing company, and it was very successful.
Don't get me wrong, it was a lot of fun, but there were a lot of moments of doubt, not whether we were doing the right thing, but whether we're going to see the results, how big are they going to be, how soon are they going to be. When 2.5 years after we launched the category, the first Gartner and Forrester reports came out in rapid succession, the Gartner Market Report on Revenue Intelligence and the Forrester Wave on Revenue Intelligence, that was a big day of celebration, because that's kind of an official stamp of approval that we've made it. We have created a category, and 2.5 years from inception to a market report is light speed for analyst firms like Gartner and Forrester. It is very rare to see them report on a category so soon after inception. And so just to give people sort of a ballpark of what to expect, sometimes they take a decade to report on a new category, or they just fail to agree that it's a new category because there's some dark magic involved in how they decide what's a real category and what's not. Is it the number of players? Is it how many hundreds of millions in revenue? Is it how many of their customers are asking about it? And all the stars aligned for this category between everything that we did, some of what our competitors did, and just a little bit of sheer luck. Stars aligned, and then they were ready to write their reports. And by then, customers were talking about it, competitors were talking about it. But this usually does not happen as cleanly and as quickly as it happened.
Yeah.
So
you also put a full-time person on this. Like, that is also unusual.
We put a full-time person on this. I honestly cannot see this working without this, because everyone has so many things to do and everyone's so busy with just getting through this quarter that the only or best way of doing this is having someone who is minded on the long term and focused on, this is a 3-year game. Here's the progress we're going to make this quarter and then next quarter. Because if you don't have someone focused on that long term, it's just not going to happen. We're always going to succumb to our short-term priorities, because we're usually measured on the results of this quarter. There's a saying in sales, you're only as good as your last quarter's results, and then you start from a blank slate on the first day of the quarter. That's how most functions operate today in the short term, or at most in this year's term. But for category creation, you absolutely need to have someone focused on the longer term and making sure she's steering that ship for everyone and showing us the progress that we're making, even if it's not evident on a daily basis. But every milestone like that, like an analyst report or the increase in Google searches or the increase in the podcast listeners and all those things that we did. Sheena co-hosted the podcast you created, Reveal, the Revenue Intelligence podcast. And I think they created over the first 2 years episodes, not skipping a week, bringing senior sales leaders to discuss how they use data to advance their sales team, and ended up with hundreds of thousands of listeners. That is a mammoth effort that not many companies are willing to take. They'll try podcast. After a quarter, they're not seeing crazy results, so they just set it aside and move on to the next shiny object. But these things do take time. You've got to put in the investment. You've got to be consistent and high quality. And eventually, if you're lucky, you'll also see the results.
Well, I'm a big fan of podcasting, Udi, and I'm just a one-person show. So you don't have to convince me. But this was awesome. I didn't get a chance to ask you everything, but we still covered a lot of really juicy stuff. And I knew I would, because that's why I've been asking for months. Like, do you have time to talk to me? So I'm so glad you joined me, Udi. If anybody wants to check out Udi's LinkedIn, which you should, because you're posting great stuff on there, you can go to Udi Ledergor, and he is on there and he is active, and so is the Gong community. So you can learn more about Gong by going to Gong.io. Very simple.
I'm going to connect on LinkedIn, but more importantly, go to Gong.io. You can get all that content that we talked about at the Gong blog. That's at gong.io/blog. And if you want to up-level your revenue team for the demands of this challenging economy, definitely check out gong.io.
That's right. Thank you so much, Udi. I just remembered you were also teaching a class that I was in, the CMO school at Pavilion. So That's another way that we were connected, and I got to chat with you. But this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks for having me.